Welcome to the Ohio Computer-Based Assessment Tutorials. This tutorial will focus on the 5th grade performance-based assessment. We are starting at the portal page, which is oh.portal.airast.org/OCBA, and that brings you to the Ohio Computer-Based Assessment portal. And then we're going to go directly to the practice test, and that will then log in as a guest. We will select grade 5, and we're going to separate these two tutorials because in the science PBAs there's some additional types of questions that we want to spend some time on, so that the tutorials aren't lengthy. We're going to divide these into two separate tutorials for the PBA and the end of year. The PBA will be the one given first, which will be in February or late March, or it's actually late February, early March, and then the end of year will be given in April or May. So we're going to select the PBA. We'll keep the settings the same, confirm them, and start the test. The first page is just an instruction page. It allows students to kind of see what different tools and navigation aids they might have. We will go ahead and start the test. Once we get to the test, this is the testing environment, what it looks like. The navigation buttons across the top where they can go forward or backwards. They can save their test, pause it, or end the test. Over here they have a note sheet that they can actually type notes on and then go back and see their notes, because they can save it and close it. And then there's a line reader that allows them to read the different lines of the text, and then they can zoom in and out so that if a student has a visual impairment, they can not have any problem seeing the text. So this first question, you'll notice, is a different type of question from a normal paper pencil test that students have taken in the past. Here they have to identify which organism performs each energy action described in the table. So they use dead matter for energy. They would click which of those, whether it's none or any of these. So they can click different, and I'm not going to look, I'm just clicking to get through the questions, but you'll notice they have to click, and they can click more than one. Now if they click more than one and it's not correct, obviously they will not receive credit for that section. Here's a traditional extended response short answer question. They have to look at the diagram and then use that, and then use their text editor to type their answer. And you can see here they have some tools that they can use, whether it's bold or italicized. They can bullet list, so on. So if students are familiar with a word processing program like Microsoft Word or something similar, they should be okay here in using the text editor. Here's another different question. We have a data set here for 4 different cars, and it gives the distance they traveled and the time they traveled. The students have to calculate and figure out what was the order of the cars, from 1 being the lowest average speed to 4 being the highest average speed. So they would put in here car A, was it 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then they would just put that number in, and then they would do that for each car. So that too is a different type of question from the traditional testing environment. Now here's the example of the very different type of question that we have, and this one is a simulation. And over here you'll notice this has to have a scroll because there's more there than it will fit. So that's the first thing students need to understand, is they have to be able to know that this scrolls, so they can read the stimuli information and then see the visual. And then what they do is they run a actual simulation, so they can introduce the number of plants into the ecosystem of 200. If they do not have any control measure, and they need to understand what they should run and what they shouldn't, because it's based on what data they need to answer this question over here. So they can hit start, and it will actually show them a short video or animation of what will happen over time if there is no control measure in the ecosystem and the tamarisk plant takes over. And down here at the end, it will come up with the data for that trial. So that's important information that students must look at to determine their answer. Now, they also have to understand, because of the scientific method involved when we're testing something, we want to make sure that we can run various tests using different variables. So now we're going to have control measure 1 and run the same test, and we can watch the animation, and we'll notice that this control measure is spraying herbicide. And then at the end of that, what happens to the ecosystem, and you can see the data there says it's temporary, it kills the top part of the tamarisk, but it kills all the native plants. So we can then move on to control measure 2, and now the next control measure is actually just coming in and wiping out everything so that the tamarisk plant is gone. Tamarisk is an invasive species, if you didn't realize that. And again, this is temporary. It kills all the tamarisk plants and the native plants, and it disrupts wildlife because obviously we're getting rid of a lot of the plants. And then finally they need to run the third control measure, and that control measure is actually using a specialized beetle that only feeds on the tamarisk plant, and then that is a permanent result, because the beetles only eat tamarisk plant leaves and they are preyed on by birds and wasps. So now the students have to take this information that has been given or gained by the simulation and then use that to answer the question. So you'll notice there's a lot of things going on here, and students really need to understand all of the parts of this question and know how to manipulate the simulation so that they can get the data that they need to answer the question. So a lot of the PBAs for 5th and 8th grade science, as well as the end of course exam for physical science, has these types of simulations. So students really have to be familiar with this type of format. Using the same data, they have another question that they have to answer, and here they're going to click the label of the role of the tamarisk plant, so they can only pick one, and then what's the impact on the ecosystem. And this again is a different type of question than what they're typically, because they can pick more than one, and that obviously will be scored wrong because they were only supposed to do the ones that were appropriate. Now they could be possibly multiple, but the students have to have a depth of understanding to understand which ones would be appropriate and which ones would not. This question again is a multiple or a extended response where they would type it using the data from the data charts. So that kind of concludes the PBA. There aren't as many questions just because of the depth of some of the questions that the students have to engage in. So hopefully this has helped explain some of the newer types of questions that students will encounter on the performance-based assessments on Ohio's new online testing platform, and give some insights to what they need to have in terms of preparation of instruction so that they can engage in these types of questions effectively. We will have another tutorial on the end of year assessment for 5th grade, so be looking for that one.